We're at the two dots on your Dalit on the base, about 10 lines from the bottom. Surgeon Shal Ksuvim. We already did Nevi'im, now we're going to move on to the Ksuvim. Rus, the order is Rus, Sefer Megillus Rus, Sefer Tehillim, Eov, Mishlei, Keheles, Shir Hashirim. The Kinnis refers to Eicha. Daniel, Megillus Esther. Ezra, the Divrei Yam. Ulamanda Amar, Eov Vimei Moshe Haya. We're going to have, the next blot is going to have a big section of a brisa with machlekes about exactly who Eov was, did he exist, when, if he did exist, when did he live, was he Jewish or not? He's a very mysterious figure. But according to Mandam, who says he lived in the time of Moshe, Eve should have been first. If you can do it in chronological order, should be before everything. Let's see, the whole Ksuvim is after the time of Moshe. So it's we don't start with Eve. Eve is a very sad story of the Puranas that happened to Eve. So Gemara, Rus Nami Parnasi. Rus is also a story of two brothers that they left because of a famine and they died. It's all sadness. So Gemara, Puranas to Islay Achras. It's a Puranas, but it has a happy ending. She was called Rus because out of her came David HaMelech, who wrote Sefer Tehillim, and he provided the Rebbeinu Shalom with songs and praise. Umi Kasman, who wrote all of these ksuvim? So Moshe Kasav Sifra. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Sefer Torah, wrote Chumash. Parshas Bulim, including Parshas Bilam, which is unusual because it's a parsha of Nevi'us of Bilam, so it's remarked on separately. The Eov, Moshe Rabbeinu also wrote Eov as well. Yeshua Kasav Sifrei, he wrote Sefer Yeshua. Ushmoine Psukim Shebetorah, the last 7 psukim, the last 8 psukim of the Torah, after Vayamas Moshe, in Vazai Sabracha. Those were written by Yeshua. Shmuel Kashav Sifra, he wrote Sefer Shmuel, V'Shoiftim, as well as the Sefer Shoiftim, V'Rus, and the Sefer Rus. David Kasav Sefer Tehillim, Al Yedei Asaros Kenim. David HaMelech wrote Sefer Tehillim, but he had the 10 people. If you look in Tehillim, it's often mentioned which person wrote specific kapitel of Tehillim. Al Yidei Adam Rishon, one of them, some was written by Adam Rishon, Al Yidei Malchi Tzedek, by Yidei Avram, by Yidei Moshe, by Yidei Haman, by Yidei Yodasan, by Yidei Asaf, by Yidei Shloshim Bnei Korach, and the 3 sons of Korach. It's interesting that, so I think, so it means he wrote them, but who were the ones, I guess, who composed them? That's why, even though we said Moshe Rabbeinu before wrote the Chumash, as well as, I think we said Eov, he's not mentioned as having written this in Tehillim, because he composed it, and Moshe and David HaMelech wrote it down. Yirmiyah Kasav Sifrei, Yirmiyah wrote his Sefer Yirmiyah, the Sefer Melachim, as well as the Melachim, Bekinnis, and Eicha. Those are all written by Yirmiyah. Chizkiah, the Siyatais, Chizkiah and his helpers, Kasvu, Yeshaya, Mishlei, Shiashir, Mukehelis. Anshe Knes Agdola Kasvu, Yecheskel, Ushnei Maser. Daniel, Megillus Esther. Those are all written by Anshe Knes Agdola. Ezra Kasav Sifroi, Sefer Ezra, the Yachas Shal Divrei Hayamim Adloi. He also wrote the part of Divrei Hayamim where it says the genealogy from how you got up to where Ezra came from, and he wrote it up to the point where he came up to his point in the genealogy. This Gemara is a raya to Rav. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Allah Ezra B'Bava Yachas Atzmai Ba'Allah. Ezra did not go up to Babel until he provided his own yichus. You know, if I don't remember where, but I remember we had a whole Gemara. I wish I could remember exactly where, about the issues with the yichus from Babel. Right? There were issues of where people came from.
Fourth paragraph Kedushin.
It was in Kedushin. Good for you. Right? So right, Asar Yuchsin is it's brought later on. But right, so this is Ezra took particular care to provide his yichus. Uman Aske, who finished up the rest of Ezra, Nechemya ben Chachalia. Amar Ma, Yeshua Kasav Sifrei. Yeshua wrote his sefer with Shmeina Psukim Shabbatayra, and he wrote the 8 psukim at the end of Zayis Bracha that talk about after the Misa of Moshe. Tanya, Commander Amar, Shmeina Psukim Shabbatayra, Yeshua Kasav. The Brisa, like the Manda Amar, that says that those last psukim written by Yeshua. The Tanya, V'yamash Moshe Eved Hashem, Efshem Moshe Chai V'Kasav V'yamash Moshe. Is it possible that Moshe was alive and he wrote V'yamash Moshe? Then he'd be writing something that was a lie. Ela'ad kan Kasav Moshe, Mikan Ve'elach Kasav Yeshua. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This is Rabbi Yehuda says that it was written by Yeshua, like we just said. For Amar of Nechemia, others say Rabbi Nechemia was the one who said this. Amalei Rav Shimon, but Rav Shimon disagrees. Efshir Sefer Torah Chaser Oisa Achas. Is it possible that Moshe didn't write the last 8 psukim? Uksiv Lakuach Sefer Torah Zeh. Moshe Rabbeinu said, take the Sefer Torah, but if it's incomplete, how could he call it a Sefer Torah if it's still missing 8 psukim? Elad Kana Kadosh Baruch Hu Oima. Until then, the Rebbeinu Shalom was reading out. Moshe, I think it's to take out the word Omer, Moshe Kaisev, and Moshe would write. Mikan ve'elach Kadosh Baruch Hu Omer, Moshe Kaisev b'dima. The last 8 psukim, rather than saying Yeshua wrote it, Moshe Rabbeinu Shalom was dictating it, and Moshe Rabbeinu would cried from hearing about his own death before he came into Eretz Yisrael, and his tears fell on the Sefer Torah and fell into the form of these psukim. It's called just bring a pasuk that discusses that. It's a pasuk in Yirmiyah that things can be dictated and written over by another. Good morning, Rafal. We are on Kesvav Amid Aleph, a little less than halfway down. Kaman Hazla Hadam Rav Yeshua Bar Abba Rav Gida Bar Amarav Shmeina Psukim Shabbatar Yachid Kairaisan. Who is this like that we say that the last 8 psukim of the Torah can only be lamed by a single person? That means normally you can make kaisafas and separate 3 psukim. But these last 8 psukim in the Torah, we don't make kaisafas on. Lema, like Rav Shimon. Let's say it's not like Rav Shimon. According to the first pshat, that it was written by Yeshua, so we can understand it's different than the rest of the Sefer Torah. But according to the Mandam, that it was written by Moshe. So why should it be different? Why should it be distinct and have different rules? The Mara, I feel Rav Shimon. No, even though it was written by Moshe, it was written in, like we said, in tears, as opposed to being written in the conventional way. That's enough of a reason for it to have different dinim as far as how it's treated in laning. Go up to the 2 dots, the middle of Tesvav now. Yeshua Kasav Sifrei. We said that Yeshua wrote his Sefer Yeshua. Yeshua Benin Avad Hashem. It says towards the end of Yeshua, it says that it talks about the Misa of Yeshua. So the Aske Elazar Hakayin finished off the Sefer. Elazar ben Aaron Mace, it discusses Elazar's Misa as well. The Aske Pinchas finished off. Shmuel Kasav Sifrei, we say Shmuel wrote his Sefer. Shmuel Mace. The Aske God HaChayzev and Asan Anavi. That was finished by God HaChoyze and Nasan and Abi. David Kosev Sefer Tehillim al Yidei Asar Skenim. We said that David wrote Sefer Tehillim with the assistance of 10 skenim. The Lechoshev Nami Eisen Hezrachi, one of the capital of Tehillim, mentions that it was written by Eisen Hezrachi. So why isn't that mentioned also as one of the composers of Tehillim? Amarav Eisen Hezrachi Zeu Avram, one of the 10 people that we had mentioned earlier on Amid Beis as the people who helped write Sefer Tehillim was Avram Avinu. So that's who we're referred to by Eisen Ezrachi. How do we know? How do we know that Avram is Eisen Ezrachi? Ksivhacha Eisen Ezrachi. That's the pasuk that says Maskal Eisen Ezrachi. That's the capital Tehillim that mentioned Eisen Ezrachi. Ksivhasam mi heyer mimizrach tzedek yikreil l'raglav. So Avram Avinu was referred to a mi heyer mizrach who brings light from the mizrach. That's what Ezrachi is referring to. Zakt Gemara, Kachashiv Moshe and Kachashiv Haman. In our list of the 10 people who helped compose Tehillim, we list Moshe Rabbeinu as well as Haman. V'amarav Haman zeh Moshe. That Haman is Moshe. So why are they listed separately? Ksivhacha Haman uksivhasam chol beisi nemenu. It's how do we know Moshe is Haman? Because the pasuk says. Shir Mizmor Livnei Korach Lamatech Machlas Anis Maskal Lahemina Ezrachi, and it says B'chol Beisi Nemanu. Moshe Rabbeinu is referred to as B'chol Beisi Neman, so he's the Haman. Zatumar Trei Haman Havi. There are two Hamans. One is Moshe Rabbeinu, and another is an individual named called Haman. Moshe Kosev Sifrei. We said Moshe wrote the Chumash Uparshas Bilam, as well as Parshas Bilam. V'Iyav Misayele V'Iyav, and he also wrote Iyav. There's a raya to the Mandam who says Iyab was at the time of Moshe. It says in the beginning of, it says in Iyab, who is going to be, like Efa is an expression of emphasis. Is going to write my words. And it says about Moshe Rabbeinu, so Efa, you have the same lashon Efa as you have in Iyov in referring to Moshe. So therefore, we assume it's that Iyov was in the time of Moshe. The aim of maybe Yitzchak. How do we know that Iyov was in the time of Moshe? Maybe it was in the time of Yitzchak. L'siv mi Efa hu atzod sayid. When it's talking about he sent Esav to go bring him a tzeda to trap something, and then Yaakov brought the tzeda, so it's used the lashon of Efa. The aim of Yaakov, and let's say it's in the time of Yaakov. L'siv im kein Efa zois asu. This pasuk is by Yosef. So the end of the pasuk before was in Iyov says mi yitin. I'm sorry, not in Iyov. In Shemais, what was that? No, I'm sorry. In Iyov, mi yitin ephai. The pasuk starts with the word ephai. V'yichtav amila, and write my words. Mi yitin b'sefer v'yichayku. They use the lashon of yichayku and engrave it. Moshe is called the Mechayik. It says Vayar Reishis like Kisham Chalkas Mechayik. So fine, because there the chaylik of the Mechayik of the engraver, meaning the engraver of the Luchas, referring to Moshe, that's where his fura is hidden. So Moshe is the Mechayik, and we use the lashon of Vayachayku in Iyov. So therefore, it was written by Moshe. It was in the time of Moshe. Rava Amar, he was not from the beginning of the days of Moshe, he was in the times of the Meraglim. There was a man in Eretz Utz. This is the beginning of Iyov Shemayin. His name was Iyov. When the Meraglim were talking of when the Meraglim was sent on their way, they were said to go check if there's eights in Eretz Yisrael. So midami hacha utz hasam eitz. It's not the same word. Hachi kamalu Moshe Yisrael. This is what Moshe was telling the Yid. Yeshin loisa adam sheshnoisa aruchas ke'etz umagan al doire ke'etz. It was talking about Eve, who lived for a long time like a tree, and he protects his dar like a tree. So that's where the lashon hayesh ba'etz, that's what it's referring to. So it's a direct reference to Eve. It's not because of just the lashon of utz in Eve, but the lashon eitz itself refers to Eve. Yosef Eve never existed. Ela mashal haya. He's a mashal, right? The whole Sefer Eve talks about how the Satan came and was telling the Rebbeinu Shalom, is Avram such a tzaddik? And the Rebbeinu Shalom said, it's Eve. So it's all a mashal. Amalei alech amakra ish haya ba'aretz utz Eve shmai. He said, how could you say that Eve never existed? The pasuk says specifically there was such a man, ish haya ba'aretz. Not that a mashal. So Gemara, Elameata, Ulurash ein kol kiim kivsa achas ktana shekana vayichya, in by the chastisement of David HaMelech for taking Bathsheba, the Navi told David HaMelech a mashal of there was a man who only had one small lamb and it was taken away from him, and he was saying that how could you take away this poor man's wife? So, and it says, Ein loy kiyim ein l'rosh ein kol kiyim kivs achas kana asher kana vayiyah. It says the lashon vayichya that he had it. It's like the pasuk refers to that mashal, and it discusses it as if it was true. So just because it says vayiyah ishaya by it doesn't mean that it's necessarily factual. There was only a mashal ba'alma, hanami mashal ba'alma. Oh, here as well, it's just a mashal. Im kain shema v'shem irei lama. More says, but it still doesn't make sense because we give all the details, his details of where he was from, and his name and the name of his parents. Why do you have to say all these details if it's just a mashal? So we reject this possibility that Eve did not exist. But we're still going to have a lot of different opinions, more opinions about when he lived. Eve was much later. He was the time of the Oile Goyla that came back from Golus after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Beis Midrash b'Tveria, and he had a Beis Midrash. He learned and he lived in Tveria. The days of the life of Eve were from the time that the Yidden came to Mitzrayim until they went out. So it seems very clear that it's a different time than anything we mentioned before. It's not the Oile Regolim, it's not earlier, it's not at the time of when they were Oile from Bava. So it's not talking about that's when he lived, but rather that's how long he lived. It's giving you a time span that the Yidden were in Mitzrayim for 210 years, and that's how long he lived. Meisvei. Shiva Nevi'im nisnavu l'umas ha'olam. There were 7 Nevi'im who said nevuah to the umas ha'olam, ve'elohein. Bilam v'aviv, Bilam and his father, ve'Eav, as well as Eav, Eliphaz hatimani u'bildad ha'shuchi v'tzeif ha'naami, Elio ben Barchal habuzi. These are the 7 Nevi'im. These 4 of them were, I think, the ones who were the supporters of Eve. They were his friends. But they all said nevuah to the Umas Olam. How could you say that Eve was from the Oile Bava, from those who returned from Bava, which is mashma, he's a Yid, and this brisa seems to say that there was Shiva Nevi'im who nisnavu Umas Olam, that he wasn't a Yid. You say because it says that these Shiva Nevi'im were nisnava to the Umas Ha'olam, that means they were not Jews. But one of them was Elio ben Barchal, and he was a Yid. But Ksiv Mishpachas Ram, it says use Mishpachas Ram, which is you don't say the mishpacha of someone who's not a yid. Ella in Vui in Vilumus. This brisa that says that they said that when Nisnava to Umas Olam doesn't mean that they themselves were not Jews, but just that they said their nevuah for not specific Levian. Hachanami Iev in Vui in Vilumus Olam. So Ein Hachanami, it could be that Iev was from the Oile Regalim and he was a Yid, and he's listed in this brisa as one of the Nevi'im who said the nevuah to Umas Olam. All Nevi'us, for any Navi, is saying it not just for Yidden, it's for Umas Olam as well. So the Mar Hasan Ikar Nevi'usa Yisrael, most Nevi'im, their Ikar Nevi'us, the Ikar target of their Nevi'us is for the Bnei Yisrael. Hacha Ikar Nevi'usayu Umas Olam. These 7 that were listed in that brisa, they were mainly talking to non-Jews. Meisvei. Chassid Hayabu Umas Olam, the Iev Shemai. There was a chassid amongst the Umas Olam whose name was Iev. So you see, obviously, he wasn't from Bnei Yisrael. But the brisa continues, they were only brought into this world to do what the Baruch commands and to be Mekabel Schar. Yisurim. The Baruch brought on Iev Yisurim, Hiskal Machar from Megadif, and he started to blaspheme. At that point, the Rebbeinu Shalom increased his hana, he got more of his schar in Olam Hazeh in order to decrease that he shouldn't have any schar left for Olam Haba. But in any case, you see that this is Chassid Hayabumas Olam, that he wasn't a Yid. It's actually say he was from the Oile Bavel who were Yid. So the Gemara Tanohi, it's a machlokes Tanoim as to whether Iev was a Jew or not. The time Rebbe Loza Omer, Iev b'mei Shveit HaShayftim hay. Iev was at the time of Shveit HaShayftim. Shenemar hein atem kulchem chazisen. You are this lashon kulchem. Now you see the lam is the hevel tivalu. And why are you engaged in vanity? Eze dar shekule hevel. Which dar would be fairly called hevel tivalu, that you're engaged in vanity? This is the dar of Shveit HaShayftim. As the Gemara is going to explain later on, Shveit HaShayftim refers to that the Shayftim themselves were judged. That when a Shayfit would say to someone, you're guilty, or as the Gemara says later on, there's a splinter in your eye, you've done something wrong, they would say back, take out the beam from your eye, that you've done even worse things, you're even more corrupt. So Shveit HaShayftim, the judges themselves were judged. They were found not to be honest, they were corrupt. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha Eimer, Iev b'mei Achashverosh. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha has a different sheet. He says, Iev was at the time of Achashverosh. Shenema, v'lenimtza nashim yavos, kibnois Iev b'chol eretz. There were no women who were as beautiful as the daughters of Iev in the whole land. Ezu darshan is vakshu by nashim yavos. Which dar do we know had a beauty contest? Haviyayim is the dar shel Achashverosh. As we know, Achashverosh sought out all the beautiful women throughout the world for his to replace Vashti. The aim would be made David. Maybe Achashverosh is not the only one who sought out beautiful women. That they sought for David a beautiful Naira to warm him up when he was cold. But that was only in Eretz Yisrael that they sought out. Achashverosh was in the entire land. So if they said that that's talking about the entire world. He was at the time of Malchus, of the Malchus of Sheva. Shenema Batipel Sheva Vatikochen. And that Sheva fell and took. That's talking about, that's in Iev. That's talking about how Iev was oppressed by Malchus Sheva. So he was at the time of Sheva. He is at the time of the Kaznim. Shnema Kaznim Shamu Shloisha Roshim. That they placed on him three I think, 3 people to rule over him. Zak the Gemara, or three armies against him. He was at the time of Yaakov. But Dina bas Yaakov Nasa. And Eve married Dina, the daughter of Yaakov. Ksiv Hacha, how do we know that? Ksiv Hacha Kadavar Achas Hanivelois to Dabri. That you're talking about Nevalis. You're talking like one of these Nevalis, one of these women who are called Nevalis, or who are disgusting. Uksiv Hasam ki Nevala also be Yisrael. When it's talking about that Shechem was Ma'anis, Yaakov's daughter Dina, it was called a Nevala. So since when Eve said to his wife that you're talking like the Nevalas, and Dina was called, what happened to Dina was called a Nevala, so the Gemara is assuming, this Tan is assuming that it was referring to Dina was the wife of Eve. All of these different shitas all said that he was a Yid, except for the last one that was said he was at the time of Yaakov, which was before the, as we're going to see in a second. If you'll say that Eve was from the Umas Olam, have a basa the Shchavim Moshe, Mishar Yishkin Alav Dekechavim. Rebbeinu Shalom had already promised to Moshe Rabbeinu that he was not going to provide nevuah to Alav Dekechavim. He requested that the Shekhinah should not rest on Alav Dekechavim, nothing like. And the Rebbeinu Shalom acquiesced to this. I'm going to separate. I'm going to make special. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu would ask, that I and my nation should be separate, that only we should have Hashras Hashmina. So therefore, all these shitas that said Eve was after the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, all must be that Eve was a Yid, because it says that the Shechina, that the Rebbeinu Shalom spoke to Eve, and the Moshe Rabbeinu had asked that it not be Hashras Hashmina anymore after he made that request. The only one who could say that Eve was not a Yid was the one that Eve said Eve was at the time of was married to Dina, which was at the time of Yaakov, and that was prior to this promise made to Moshe Rabbeinu. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Daira shel Eve shatav b'zimahaya. The daira of Eve was infected with licentiousness. Shenemar, hein atem kulchem chazisem, v'lam hazet hevel tivalu. And now you are gazing, and why are you hevel tivalu? Why are you empty and vain? So lashon chazisem was saying is a lashon of promiscuousness. Uksiv shuvi hashunam shuvi v'nechsebach. In Shir Hashir, we says return the shulamis, shuvi v'nechsebach, and that's a lashon talking about looking at the shulamis, to gaze at her in an inappropriate way. So we say that kulchem chazisim is also talking about zima. So Gemara, how do you know it means to talk or to make a reference to lack of tznius? Ema b'nevuah. Maybe the lashon of bizayin is referring to nevuah. The vision of Yishayahu ben Amitz, which is talking about nevuah. Zakdamar in kain lamazet hevel tivalu. The lashon of vanity does not match up with saying that it's talking about nevuah. Lamal. What is it? This is what we referred to before, that we said Shvait HaShoiftim was a evil dar. Dar sheshayfet HaShoiftim. It's talking about a dar that judges the judges. When a judge tells a person to take out the splinter, you've done something wrong. It's an expression meaning take the splinter out of your eye, this is what you've done wrong. Take out the beam, you've done even worse. When the judge says to a person that your silver is adulterated, it's mixed up with other things, and you're not being honest. Amalai sevacha mohol b'mayim. Your wine is diluted. The judge is just as bad. Amr Shumba Nachmani Amr Rabbi Yonason. Kol Oimim Malka Sheva Isha Haisa. Anyone who says that the monarch of Sheva was a woman, any Elatoi, they're making a mistake. My Malka Sheva, Malchusa de Sheva. It's referring to the kingdom of Sheva. It's not referring to a woman. So now we're going to go through the psukim and Eiv one by one. So this is the beginning of that mashal that we said, that the Rebbe Shalom made according to Madam, that said it was a mashal, that it was on that day, the Malachim came to Hashem, and the Satan's together with them. He asked the Satan, where are you coming from? The Satan answered. He answered, what did he answer? Can't find this. Mem. I was wandering around the earth. I wandered around the entire earth. I didn't find anyone who was as trustworthy as Avram. Because the Rebbe Shalom told Avram that he's going to give him the entire Eretz Yisrael. And even so, when he was in Eretz Yisrael, he couldn't find a place to bury Sarah. Even though Avram had reason to doubt, because he was assured he was going to get the whole Eretz Yisrael, he couldn't even find a place to bury his wife. Even so, he never questioned the Rebbe Shalom. The Rebbe Shalom said to the Satan, you're saying that there's no one like Avram. What about Eiv? There's no one like him. He's also a Neman. It's even greater what the Rebbe Shalom said about Eiv from what he said about Avram. It says about Avram that the Rebbe Shalom said about him that now I know that you are Yar Elikim after the Akedah. Ish Tam B'Yasher Yar Elikim B'Samera. He would by Eiv, it doesn't say that I just know now. It says he was complete. He was a person who was tam, he was complete, v'yasher and straight, and he was a Yar Elikim from beginning to end. V'Samera, and he kept away from Ra. My V'Samera, what does it mean that he turned away from Ra? Once we say he was a tam v'yasher, what do you have to say he turned away from Ra? Eiv was generous with his money. The minig of the olam is if someone owes a half of a pruta, which is left, the smallest denomination is a pruta. If someone owes a half a pruta to someone, he'll give a pruta to the chembani and say, give him a half a pruta of goods. Vitra mishaloi, but he would give the entire pruta. Vayana Satan is Hashem vayomer. The Satan answered Hashem and he said, Hinam yora Eiv elikim. Does Eiv serve you? Does he fear you for nothing? You've given him everything, so that's why he fears you. My maisi yadav berachta. What does it mean? That the pasuk continues that you blessed his the work of his hands. It means that not just was Eiv himself misbarach, but anyone who took a pruta from him was also misbarach ba'adai. Ma yomekneu paratz ba'aretz, that his flocks increased in the land. Parts of Gidr Shalom, they were different than every other flock. Normally, wolves kill the goats. By Eiv, the goats would kill the wolves that try to attack them. So the Satan said, if let's see what happens if you. He told the Rebbe Shalom, "Shlach yadecha, go ahead and stick out your hand to him, and touch what he does, and and see Yivarecha is a euphemism that he'll be mechar from a gadif. And the Bershom gave the Sultan free reign. He said, you can go ahead and do whatever you want with him, as long as you don't touch him. So what happened was that all of this children of Eev were eating together with his Bechor. They said that the bakar, the ox, were in the middle of plowing. What does it mean that the bakar, the ox, were plowing, and next to them the chamayrim were eating, were grazing? The Bershom gave him something similar to Elam Haba, that as soon as the ox would plow, immediately it would grow, and the asinus would be able to eat on the spot. Okay, we'll stop over here. Tomorrow, I suspect we're going to need a little extra time.